welcome everyone. Welcome one and all to Impolite Company on the GCPR.live network. This is the show, of course, where we do what the old adage is. We talk about religion and politics. I'm your host, Matthew Best, and we walk together through honest dialogue, explore messy truths, language, and try to see the humanity and perspectives that are different from our own. If you have a thought or a question, want to challenge something, you can always email me at contactimpolitecompany@gmail.com. Don't forget, you can subscribe to past and future episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. And just search for Impolite Company, and you can always see the logo behind me. And if you want to dive deeper into some of the themes that we explore here, you can visit my blog, which is pastormatthewbest.com. And of course, you can always support the show by going to buymeacoffee.com/impolite company. So we're going to get into today's conversation. I am super excited. I think this is the second time, Samantha, you've been on the show. Samantha Bise is a professor and author who studies language and power, especially related to Christianity. And she's the co-host of the Church Chatter podcast and the author of Tongue in Church, a Liberating Primer on Christian Vocabulary. And you can find her work on Instagram at dr.bise. Samantha, welcome.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here.
It's great to have you here. I love having authors on. Number one, I love to read, so big shock for everybody, I know. And I love reading nonfiction.
That's
And
my genre of choice.
right? Oh, it's so
hmm
much. There's so much there.
hmm
And I know everyone has their own personal favorite thing. So I'm excited to have you on today because I do want to talk about this book that you have that's coming out. And I was so excited that you had asked me to take a look at it and offer some comments and an endorsement and whatnot. And so I had a chance to read it, which absolutely loved it. Highly recommend it for folks, for especially the church nerds in the world, but also other folks who are not church nerds, because I
hmm
think there's a lot of value to what you're offering. So I want to give you an opportunity. What is the book about?
What is the book about? Well, it's about Christian vocabulary. So I was 28 years old the first time I like to say the first time I walked into a church on purpose, um, because I didn't go to church growing up, but I did. Like my grandmother who thought that I was a heathen because my brothers and I didn't go to church. You know, sometimes we'd visit her like 4 hours away and we'd go to church with her or like sometimes with a friend. Sometimes like I've been into churches before, but the first time I walked into a church on purpose, I was 28. And the language they used,
Uh,
like son of God, are you saved? Right? Like what are you talking about? And I was an observer of Christianity probably for like 6 years. I would just go, I don't know why. Now I'm a bona fide Christian somehow in the process, but I just felt like an anthropologist. Like, what are they talking about? Like a
uh-huh.
sacrifice, an offering, like even the liturgy is just like, what is this weird thing? This is crazy. And it moves so many people to hatred, but it also moves so many people to love. Like, what do you do with it? So, Son of God, all of this language, and I study language and culture. I mean, I'm an English professor. I used to be a librarian, so literacy. I had my doctorate from Indiana University in language, literacy, and culture. So that's what I study. So I thought I'm just going to study religious language. Um, Long story short. So that's what this is. It is a book about a lot of Roman Empire stuff
Yeah.
because to understand a lot of like why do we call Jesus son of God, all of that you need to understand the Roman Empire. So it just goes through, I actually haven't counted, I don't know, like 50 words, 60 words or something. It goes through all of this language, but it's split into two sections, which my editor helped do. There's biblical language and then there's church language, because I think oftentimes we think Christianity begins and ends with the Bible, but it does not. Right?
Right.
Like the church is a
Right.
witness to it and keeps it alive. And there were also things before the Bible that impact the Bible that we have now. So it just talks about different terms and their historical and cultural context and all of that.
I love the fact that I don't know if anything like this has ever been done in a very approachable way.
hmm
I know there are like compendiums and all these type of things that really dive into a lot of deep type of things, or will look at specifically look at the Greek or the Hebrew or something like that, and they have these huge long volumes in this. But this is definitely more. I hear your story really kind of coming through this. This is an approachable book for folks who maybe not have a lot of experience with church, or maybe they do have experience with church, but have, like, yeah, I wonder what that word means. And so that's one of the things I really appreciate about this, because I think it's very approachable, the way
That
that
was
you went about it.
intentional. It was
Yeah.
really intentional. And when I thought about an audience, because they ask you that in the publishing process, I thought, well, I want something that anybody could pick up and understand, but I also want it to be, I want it to have depth. But I also thought, I started getting a lot of interest from people who've been harmed by the church.
Mm,
So the tone that I took, like, I feel like people who are like knee deep in Christianity, they would love it. But also the
yeah.
people who are kind of fed up with Christianity, I wanted them to like it too. So I tried to kind of toe that line.
I think this is really important too, in this time in which there is so much division,
Mhm.
um, and so much of what gets presented as Christianity. Right? There's Christian nationalism, which will cosplay as Christianity, as I like to call it, and it uses a lot of these same words, right? But oftentimes, when Christian nationalism is using these words, they have a completely different meaning than what
Yeah.
the institution of the church and historically what has been meant by a lot of these words. I mean, oftentimes, like, I hear some of these folks, like the Joel Webbins and all those type of folks that are. I will restrain myself from from what I really think, uh, but they're using the same words. And I'm often going, are we worshiping the same Jesus? Are we in the same religion at all?
Yeah. Yes. So this book, in a very personal way, is my small contribution to not handing Christianity over to the Christian nationalists.
Yeah,
Because I think that everybody has their part to play there. And I'm a writer, so I wrote this book because I see such a beautiful story that
right.
saves a lot of people. I mean, I know people who have gotten clean and they have clung to the Jesus story. I know
Yep.
people who did liberated. I mean, a lot of my work has to do with oppression and liberation and themes related to that. And the Jesus story matters for a lot of
Yeah,
people. Some people are hijacking it. And for me, from my perspective, it begins with the language.
right,
And my book opens with the story, which I know you know, about my grandmother's funeral,
right.
where, I mean, there was an altar call. I had never
Yeah,
experienced an altar call before because I'm a Lutheran. Mainline
right,
Protestantism is really my only experience, and a couple evangelical like friends that I would go to, and I just knew right away that's not for me. But there was an altar call at my grandmother's funeral, and he said her name was Barb. If you want to see her again, you're going to come up here and give your life to Jesus, or you're going to burn forever. And he used language that I used all the time in my church. I heard it, but
right.
it was used very differently.
Yeah,
And I was in my doctorate program at the time, so I just changed my research focus after that. So I was like, okay, like all these Christians are using the same words, but it is not the same word.
right, right. Absolutely. Yeah, and that goes beyond just church. That's into politics as well, right? And any of these type of larger identity oriented type of things. You can see this in, like, how the word freedom gets used. There's different in liberty and those type of things in that. So I want to ask you this. This is a fun question.
Okay.
What was your favorite word that you wrote about?
My favorite word. Well, like two or three kind of come up for me, but they're
Okay.
all related. So for
Yeah.
me, the first one that started, well, let's just start here. Let's lay the
Yeah.
groundwork with the Jesus story is a story, especially the Easter story of like death, descent, and resurrection. And I feel like
Mhm.
that's the pattern of everything. And I feel
Yep.
like culturally, we are in a descent right now.
Yep.
There will be a resurrection. We don't know what that looks like, right? But we're in a descent. And I think that this book is written for that tension. Is like we have to deconstruct it all because culturally we're there. Everything, like we're
Right.
questioning everything. So for me, what started that descent and what started that deconstruction and taking apart of all the language was Son of God. When
Mm.
I first learned that Roman emperors were called the Son of God long before Jesus entered the scene.
Yeah.
It was like a blanket and one loose thread, and you pull it, and the whole blanket comes apart for me. It
Mm,
all started coming apart for me. And then the word gospel, the good news, that was a government announcement of good
right.
news for Roman emperors, their victories, their
Right.
birthdays. What
Yep.
do we celebrate? The victory of the cross and Jesus's birthday, right? That's the
Yep.
gospel story. That was a Roman term. So those two kind of work together for me. And then baptism was another one. A baptism was not an initiation into Christianity. It was a cultural practice, and John the Baptist specifically refused to use Roman built baths around Jerusalem. So he went to another body of water because he was so invested in not being tied to Rome. So this whole
Right.
story, so those three, I was like, wait a second, this is political. And I
Oh
had
yeah.
people in my own life, I start to talk about it, and they would say, oh, it's just too political. The Jesus story isn't political. And I
Whew.
just started to feel crazy where I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't think that we have the same Christian understanding anymore. And then I started to find a lot of people who were like, oh yeah, totally. But it's
Yeah.
political. I can't unsee it. Once I see it, I can't
Oh,
go back.
absolutely. And this is one of those things that I, I get why people don't want it to be political, right? They want they're looking for something that is going to give them some kind of safety, some type of they just want encouragement. They don't want it to be messy, those type of things. And I get why people want that. And at the same time, it's an essential part of the story. Like, when I've had people who have complained about, oh, you're being political, pastor, I'll be like, so you do know that, like, the beginning of Matthew's gospel, Herod, who's a king, who's a puppet king essentially of Rome, goes and slaughters the innocents because he's worried about his political power. And at the end, what's hung up above Jesus is King of the
King of
Jews
the
by the
Jews.
Romans because they see him as an insurrectionist. Like, I
Yes.
don't know how you read it and not get political.
And we even go deeper. A majority of the gospels were written after the destruction of the temple, and the
Right.
Jews were either slaughtered
Yep.
or paraded naked through
Yep.
Roman streets into their life of enslavement. So the Jews were scared. So
Yep.
then, whenever these Jesus followers had to write down the gospels, they had to write it in a way that was not anti-Rome. So they put a lot of emphasis on, like, oh no, Pontius Pilate didn't really
Right.
do it. It was the Jews. It was the,
Uh-huh.
like, where it's like, no, they had to write that way because if
Right.
Romans, who had just destroyed them and put
Right.
them back in the diaspora, like this, all of this crazy stuff, once you learn the language and the literacy of it all, you see it everywhere.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It reminds me of a professor in seminary had said, "Do you know why the early Christians fasted on Wednesdays and Fridays? Do you happen to know?"
Because for Jews, it was other days and they had to
Yeah.
separate themselves from the Jewish
Yep.
way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and most people will end up saying, "Oh, well, Fridays, because that's when Jesus died and all this." It's like, no, there was a very practical reason
Hmm.
for
Yeah.
this.
Every step. That's why our Sabbath is Sunday and not
Right.
Saturday. They had to separate themselves from the Jews to become a new thing. Yeah, for
Well,
better.
and
I
it
mean,
depended on where they were, because in some cases they wanted to be associated with the Jews because the Jews had a place of some privilege, or at least were not being persecuted. And then other places there was this anti-Jewish sentiment, and so they were like, "Oh, no, 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 we're different." And
hmm.
that's all fascinating stuff,
Yeah.
man.
Well,
So,
and even the language, like, so, which I'm really grateful for, my developmental editor, I use the phrase promised land a
hmm,
lot.
okay,
And now I don't know if you noticed, I don't use it once.
yeah, yeah. I was
We
gonna
took it
say
all
I
out.
didn't see it in there.
We took it all out and replaced it with other language because of current political realities.
Sure,
That's a really weighted word.
right,
So we took it out. We were really intentional. So even just the political decisions, just in the writing of the book,
yeah,
was heavy.
yeah. So I want to ask you a different version of the same question. What was
Hmm.
the most difficult word for you to work on?
Um, oh, that's a good question. I actually have a list over here of all my words
Okay.
because I didn't want to
Yeah,
forget.
right.
Um, Okay, so the word hell I originally didn't have in there, but then I realized I have to add that.
Okay.
That wasn't hard. I just know that some of my extended family who I love so much, they're not going to love that.
Sure.
They're not going to love that. And they're going to buy my book because they love me, but they're not going to love that. Um, but then there's words. I wanted to write this, and this is just the art of being a mature adult. There's some things that I wanted to call out, but I also wanted to be loving.
Yeah.
So words like fundamentalists,
Hmm.
words like evangelical, words that just, there are some things that I wanted to say about those words because they can be dangerous.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to be loving and not on the defense. I never wanted to come off like I was defending something
Yeah.
or being anti-human in any way. So
Sure.
those were hard to write.
Yeah,
Those
I'm
are hard
sure.
to write.
I can
Yeah.
imagine. I don't know if you've ever read uh it's The Evangelicals is the name of the book. It's a history of
It has a
evangelicalism.
green and blue cover.
Yeah, I think, well, there's a I can't remember. It's
Oh
like
no, I'm thinking of
Fitzgerald or
evangelical.
Fitzgerald or Fitzpatrick. I can't remember anyway. It's really thick. It's like 500 pages long. It's really fascinating, and it goes into the history going all the way back to the Puritans
Mm.
in this. And so, like, when you're reading this, I have this mixture of like, oh my gosh, and oh, this is interesting. I can see how they would come to these conclusions, and that's what I hear in what you're saying about those type of terms.
Yeah, those Puritans, that's a whole other conversation to unpack too. There's a lot there.
Oh my gosh, I have I'm known to rip on the Puritans plenty. I'm not a
Mhm.
big fan of the Puritans. I think
Yeah.
they caused a lot of problems, and even though they're all dead, God rest their soul, their
They've just
impact
evolved into
continues.
other systems. Yeah, they're
Right,
it's still
right.
here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another group of words that was difficult was anything related to Revelation. So like
Oh yeah, sure.
Whore
Yep,
of Babylon, Mark of the Beast, all of
yep,
those would have a lot to do with Rome.
yep.
Just because I was thinking about how it would be received and I wanted to say it very precisely.
Yeah, Revelation, boy, I actually like Revelation. I'm one
Me
of the
too.
few people, right?
Me too. I used to hate it, but it's such a political book and a
Oh, it's
historical book and so much
right.
symbolism and metaphor. I really like it. I used to be afraid of it. Now I think it might be my favorite.
Yeah, I mean, when my go-to like favorite passages are Revelation 21 and 22. I mean,
Mm,
the imagery of the tree of life in the center of the city with leaves for
yes.
the healing of the nations. Oh my gosh, it's so
Uh-huh.
rich, and it has this sense of shalom
Hmm.
that just runs throughout the whole imagery in there. um so which actually leads to are there words that you wish you could have put in? Like I was hoping that you were going to have shalom as its own thing.
There are Shalom was in there. Shalom got cut. Um, because this is already like I think it's
Yeah.
about 200 pages or something. And
Yeah.
if you want it to be accessible, you don't want to go too
Right.
big. Shalom got cut. I am married to a Lutheran pastor, as you know. Pastor's wife was in there.
Oh,
That got
interesting.
cut because pastor's wife has a lot of history to it as well,
Sure.
because it used to be that priests would have concubines on the sign and have illegitimate children. So
Yep.
actually originally to make the pastor's wife in Protestantism this like raised role was to legitimize the woman
Yeah.
who the priest or pastor was married to, which was actually a pretty noble beginning. And then it just became this like very, it put the pastor's wife into a box. So I had
Right.
that and that was taken. And I had to make some choices and I kind of wish I kept that one.
Yeah.
I actually feel like I could do a part two because there's a lot of words that
Oh,
could be.
sure.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of words. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to ask you this, in the process of writing this, and before we had started the show, we had talked about how like books are kind of like children, are
Yeah.
children,
Yeah.
except the gestation period is actually longer in a book.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm curious, what did you learn from doing this project?
Yeah. Well, I'm a writer first and foremost. I've always been a writer and I teach writing classes. And writing is not I mean, you already know this because you're asking this question. You don't know something and then write about it. You write about it and then know it.
Yep.
So, I mean, I learned a lot of things. I learned a lot about how Christianity is in negotiation, and it always has been. Some of the words that I talk about are like simple ones, but ones that when I first started going to church, I didn't know, like Sadducees,
Hmm.
Pharisees,
Hmm.
Essenes, all that. I didn't know the difference. So I spelled that out in this book, which is to say that there were like even Jews before Christianity.
Right.
They didn't agree. There were a lot of different kinds. And I think sometimes we're told this lie, not directly, but we kind of inherit this belief that there's one true Christianity or
Yeah.
that Christianity is the one true faith. But
Uh-huh.
what Christianity?
Yep.
Even like when people say, like, oh, it's in the Bible, what Bible?
Right.
What translation? What books? Do you have the Apocrypha or not? Like, what Bible? Even if you're a Protestant, Martin Luther didn't want to, like, Revelation was an appendix. So, what Bible are you talking about? Because we can't even agree on what the Bible is. And
Right.
I don't think that's a bad thing.
Right.
So
Right.
that's my biggest takeaway is it's in negotiation, and I very much want to be a part of that conversation.
There's that reminds me very much of what was it? Another book. This is going back last year, I think it was. Oh, I can't remember. Amy Carr is one of the authors, and it was about theology in a divided time,
Mm,
essentially, justification in a divided time, right? And so, coming from a very Lutheran perspective, and in this book, they talk about the idea of what's orthodox and what's heresy. And heresy, what they talk about, is the idea of shutting down conversation.
mhm,
It's just pretty much got to that point of like, nope, we're done. Whereas orthodoxy is actually a continuation of the conversation, and that's
mhm.
I hear a lot of what you're saying in that, which I've never heard those terms defined that way, but it makes a lot of sense because you think about like the creeds were formed over a long period of time, a lot of conversation that was taking place, and and now we have with the anniversary of the Nicene Creed is kind of at least in the Lutheran world, Lutheran and Orthodox have this agreement of like, hey, by the way, the Filioque, you guys were probably right, um, and
That's so good. That's so
yeah,
good. It makes me think about how I've had people recently tell me that they think the next needed evolution in Christianity is to go non-creedal. And I
mm,
very much disagree
yeah,
because I think that the creed, I think that we should wrestle with it. And it keeps, just like you said, it keeps the conversation going when we keep ancient liturgy, whenever we keep the creeds, it keeps it going versus if we just call something heretical and then throw it out. Now what? Are we starting from scratch?
yep,
What is it? And what unifies us? And I love the Protestant Reformation specifically because it put the Bible and then religious texts and the text in general in the hands of women, which is important.
yeah,
But also we're kind of addicted to fragmenting now of just like
oh yeah,
we disagree with something, so then we just fragment more. And I feel like getting rid of the creeds would just be another thing of like, what's going to unify us then? Because even if you don't call it a creed, every community is going to have
right,
a creed. But
yep,
now it's going to be so micro. And there's pros and cons to that. But that's really
of
interesting
course,
about the Orthodox and heresy thing. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So all right, let me take a break here for a moment. I want to
Mhm.
interject of a few things that I care
Sure.
about, and then we'll come back into the conversation. So
Hmm.
first, Christ Lutheran Church in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. It's where I serve as the pastor as well as the executive director of the health ministries here. This is very much a healing community that we host 3 free health clinics that have welcomed over 100,000 visitors since 2018, and way beyond that. The health ministries have been going on since before the turn of the century, which always sounds like a weird thing. We're talking about the year 2000, not 1900. Anyway, and our tagline is one church plus 3 clinics equals new futures. If you want to be a part of something beautiful, you want to learn more, you can go to christharrisburg.org. We're always looking for support for the health ministries, for the congregation. You can do that right off the website. Second, Blanket Project, something that I'm one of the co-founders of. It's every year people from all over the country. And in fact, we've gotten blankets from different parts of the world. They create blankets for strangers, and we turn those into a massive art installation that draws attention to homelessness. And then at the end of the night, we give away all the blankets. We've done this in a variety of different places. This is going to be the sixth year, which I can't believe that that's the case. We're going to New York City, and we're going to live it up there. So you can go to memorialblanket.org. Finally, if you're wrestling with the topic of gun violence, I'll offer you the book American Roulette. Again, one of the co-authors. It's a novel, fiction. So I told you before, I'm not a big fan of fiction, but here we wrote a piece of fiction about a mass shooting. And the reason why it was a fictional account is because gun violence oftentimes is too difficult to talk about real events. And so this gives an avenue for people to talk about a difficult topic. The book does not offer any type of solutions in it. The point is to focus on the humanity of those that are have this situation, um, from the perpetrator all the way to the community and the responders, as well as the victims and their families. All proceeds of the book goes to organizations that address gun violence. People can get a free audio version at AmericanRouletteBook.com. In 2027, we're going to actually have a graphic novel of the book, so we're pretty excited about that. And anyway, so you can find that out. All right, so back to the show. So Samantha, we've been talking about your book, and it's awesome. I really really love it, and I look forward to getting a signed copy at some point. Uh, um, but I want to switch a little bit and talk about the importance of language,
Mm-hmm.
because we've been talking around this, with the here's a book about the importance of language, and we were talking about why you were writing this. One of the things that I've always that I remember in seminary, we learned Koine Greek, and then I took Hebrew as well. And one of the neat things about that is when you start to understand a language, you really start to understand the culture as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, as whether you were talking about this book, or you're an English professor, how have you found that to be the case?
Just language in general.
Yeah.
I mean, oh my gosh, this is my wheelhouse. We could go on and on.
Softball question, right?
Yeah, I mean, in seminary, I'm sure you learned about like ecofeminism, right? Like the language that we use exposes us. It
Right.
exposes who has power and who doesn't. For example, when a culture, so we know this because of science and data, when a culture abuses its women, you can bet your bottom dollar it's abusing the planet. And vice versa. If they take care of their women, they're abusing the planet, or they're taking care of the planet. And we know this through language too. Like what do we do with women? Um, I mean, there's language like rape, like um, um, fertile, right? Like, I mean, I could go, there's so much
Yep.
language that's used for both because we see them as both. And then, so our language exposes these things. And then it even goes deeper. I mean, in linguistics, there's arguments about does the language come first or does the identity come first? Either way, I think they feed each other. And I think it's the Russian language. They have many words for different shades of blue. And if
Mm.
you hook their brains up, a Russian speaking person can identify light blue or dark blue much quicker than an English speaking person because to us, we label it all as blue.
Oh,
So the
interesting.
language that we use to label things actually changes us and how we process and
Yeah.
what we process. So it's there everywhere,
Yeah, that's really fascinating. Wow, I didn't
right?
know that. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and this was reminding me, because like Hebrew, the way that Hebrew is written, and the way that I had learned some of the Hebrew, was it's written almost in a form of questions
Mm-hmm.
without the question marks, right? And so it's always like it's making a statement that's really answering questions. So it starts off with God. Well, then the question is, which God? The God of Israel. And okay, well, what about the God of Israel? Well, the God of Israel said. and then, it goes on, which really relates to when you think about this in terms of when Jesus is in the temple and he's having these conversations with the Pharisees and the Sadducees. What are they doing with each other? They're asking each other questions,
Yeah,
right?
that's so good.
And it's like, well, of course they are, because that's exactly what the language is lending itself to,
Hmm.
is questions. And then, you have like all the commentaries, so like the Talmud and the Mishnah and all of that, which are really doing the same thing as well. They're asking questions, and then they're saying, well, the school of Hillel says this, and the school of this says this, and the school of this says this, and there's three different answers for the same text. And it's
Yeah.
like, which is the right answer? Well, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
uh
Yeah, and if your language is set up for that, right?
right.
Like in the English speaking world, we really like, so if a lamp falls over, we don't, it's very unnatural for us to say the lamp fell over. It's more natural for us to say Joe pushed the lamp. It's a very blaming
Right.
kind of language. So we are quick to blame. Like there's studies on that too, because our language is set up to blame and things don't just happen. There always needs to be a subject making it
Mm,
happen. We are set up to blame people. And if you hook up our brains, it's the same thing. You can see that we are looking for someone to blame all of the time for any action because language influences it,
that's really fascinating. And
right?
I wonder how much of that goes into, like, just the thing that I'm drawn to when you said that was, of course, because you're dealing with English. I mean, the English Empire was around for how long?
Mm-hmm.
And so empires are never taking responsibility for what happens. There's always somebody to blame.
Yeah.
There's always somebody to scapegoat. And like, holy cow, like, just
Yeah.
it's
And
yeah,
also, it shows who is centered. So we
right.
read from top left down. And when you look at maps that have been flattened, who's in
Yeah,
the top left? The United
right,
States. In English speaking, like that's the top left because we've created a lot of the images, right?
right.
So we've centered ourselves.
Yeah,
Even whenever we say the Northeast, Northeast to who? It's a very
right,
European perspective, right? Because a
right.
lot of people in the Northeast, they would not call themselves from the Northeast. Like we just center things with our language all the time, and it changes how we think about the whole world.
Well, and I'm wondering the relationship between the written words and the images. Right,
Mm,
because now you're talking about maps. I don't know if you've seen a map where Jerusalem, there's ancient maps of Jerusalem as the center, and then everything is drawn out from there.
yeah.
And they're fascinating maps because it's like, from my perspective, it's unrecognizable, because of the map that you just described is the one that we always,
Hmm.
it's been burned into my head as far as what the world looks like. But here's a different map that is using imagery to accomplish the same type of thing in that. And I'm just wondering, I know, like, oftentimes when you think about words are conveying ideas and oftentimes images. And I'm just wondering if there's any more of, I don't know.
So there's this theory in linguistics. This is hard to prove because it's talking
Sure.
about like ancient people. But essentially, whenever the word was written down, when the alphabet, the written word was created, this is really generalizing. There's
Yeah,
some
yeah.
nuance here, but the left brain is very rational
Right.
and culturally masculine. It's rational, it's linear, all of those
Yep.
things, which is what we've decided is masculine. And then the right brain is creative and
Right.
holistic and all those things. And we've decided that that's feminine. And the language side is the rational side, the
Hmm.
masculine side. So whenever we have the written word, a lot of people in linguistics think that's part of the rise of patriarchy
Oh,
because you
interesting.
have these masculine things, but the other side of the brain is what processes metaphor,
Yeah.
images.
Right.
And the Hebrew text, especially, is one of the formative first written down things.
Right.
So you have this monotheistic faith that gets passed on, but then you also have patriarchy being written down and kind of immortalized. And does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh,
So there's
absolutely.
it's
It
all
makes
kind of
sense.
talking to each other like patriarchy and also Judaism and Christianity and the Abrahamic faiths and all those things. And then you have images kind of because they're feminine and because now the part of our brain responsible for reading, because literacy became so important so fast,
Yeah.
that's all lit up and that's really valued in our culture now. So the
Yes.
part that's feminine, that's around the time in history too, whenever we stopped goddess worship,
Yeah.
which is interesting. So that's evidence that people point to that like the feminine stuff started to be less than and
Yeah.
inferior because of the written word, and religion has to do with all of that. So fascinating, right?
Have you, here's another book, the Lost Art of Scripture.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Karen, I can't remember her name. I'm drawing these off the top of my head. So, great book. Oh my gosh, loved it. Absolutely loved it. Again, because it's talking about very much a lot of the history of scriptures, of all
So I
scriptures.
haven't
Right?
read it, but I have it in my big pile to read.
Oh, you will love it. It's definitely heady, but I absolutely I think it's one of the best, one of the top 10 books that I have read.
I'll have to
Uh,
put it on top of my list.
yeah, it tells the story of scripture, and that's not just Christian scripture. That's all. So we were talking about Hindu scripture and Buddhist scripture and all.
Mhm.
And what is scripture? How did it come about? How did it form? What's the story? And then also that kind of as each of those came about, how did they develop and how did they interact with culture? Right. And one of the things that she talks about in there, especially in Western Europe, is this notion of when around the time of Enlightenment, really, where everything went very left brain, uh,
Yeah.
and to the detriment of the right brain. And this is where we end up with all these religious wars that, because you do not believe the right thing, we need to,
Hmm.
burn you at the stake and all that other stuff. But then she talks about the rise of like the mystics in response as kind of this pendulum swing back, because it's much more abstract and there's creativity and all that type of stuff, and it's more experiential in
Yeah.
that.
Well, you had the Great Schism in 1066
Right,
too. So you've got the Eastern and then you've got
right,
like the Latinized Western, which
yep,
really went in that rational direction.
right,
Yeah.
yeah, very
Yeah.
fascinating. Love
One
this.
of my favorite things that I read years ago was if you want to be a student of history, you have to be a student of religion because
Mm,
history is religion and religion is history. We like
yeah,
to parcel it out now, but you can't. I'm
right.
convinced, especially after writing this book, that you can't possibly understand history if you don't have a grasp of religion and vice versa.
I would agree with that. I think this notion, I think Americans especially struggle with that notion of understanding the two together because
Hmm.
we haven't had a state church.
Yeah.
I mean, religion has always had its place, and of course now we have this debate about whether we were a Christian nation or not,
Mm.
which is a whole other thing. But like I spent a year in Finland, and the importance of religion in Finland is tied to the culture, because in Finland the first municipal governments were churches, because the priest was the most educated person in the town. They ended up being the judge. They ended up being, the person who was essentially the doctor if they didn't have a doctor. They were, so like there's literally like municipal lines that are the church lines as far as what the parish, who the parish served, and then the taxes were collected based on those geographical lines of the church, not the church property, but the area that the church served. Uh,
And even somebody from Germany recently emailed me, and they have state
yeah,
Lutheranism, and she was telling me that even people who don't necessarily want to be involved in the church, they keep paying their taxes,
yep,
and part of that going to the church because they want a funeral,
yep,
and they want, if they get sick, they want somebody to come play
yep,
that role of pastor. Like they want these certain like rites of passage and
yep,
rituals.
yeah,
And we are being married to a pastor, and you're a pastor, so you know this. There are a lot of people who will call Dylan, my husband, at the end. They've never been to church, but they want a pastor now,
yep,
but they haven't. contributed to a church in any way, so they're not tied to anything.
Right.
That's just really interesting culturally too. It's not integrated here. It's
Right.
also separate, but you do lose out on something if you are somebody who wants that at any point.
Yeah, absolutely. Finland, they now have freedom of religion. And they said people will start to pay the tax so that they can be members of the church, so they can baptize their child or for a wedding or at the end of their life. So that because the churches are responsible for the cemeteries.
Mm,
So there's no other cemeteries. They're all church cemeteries, which raises a whole thing. And anyway, real fascinating stuff.
that is really fascinating. And connected to politics, if you shut down all of our religious institutions tomorrow, a lot of people are going to be hungry. A lot of people aren't going to be
Right.
fed or have shelter. So I think it's okay to be critical of all these things, but also we need to give credit where credit is due.
Yeah.
So it's all mixed in with politics. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you've been here to Christ Lutheran. You've
Yeah.
seen the
Magical stuff happening over there. Magical
and
stuff.
I've said, I'm like, if healthcare worked the way that so many of us think that it should work, the way that we think it's supposed to be designed to work. I'm always really trying to be really careful with how I say it.
Mhm.
This church wouldn't exist, and these clinics wouldn't exist, which I would be okay with because that would mean that healthcare would be working for everybody. But it doesn't. So we
Yeah.
do exist, and we catch the people at the very bottom of the healthcare system because the next stop is the street. They got nowhere to go, and that does
Mhm.
not help anybody. That makes it worse.
Yeah.
This gets into the whole thing of individualism here in this country and how it has such a shape
Mhm.
on it. I'm wondering about the idea are you familiar with like national myth? Richard
Yeah.
Slotkin has written things about national
Hmm.
myth, and
Yeah.
I'm wondering about your thoughts on the role of national myth shaping the language, especially when it comes to religion.
I mean, no specific words come to, oh, well, I mean, every community has a myth, and I like to just make it really specific so people can understand. Like, I think about who I am. I have stories that my parents tell over and over and over again about different parts of my childhood. So it's become an origin story for me. And it's even if I feel like I've grown beyond it, it's still a part of me, right?
Mhm.
Like something silly I did one time or that thing I did that time. We all have these origin stories that we inherit. Like here is what it means to be you, and you can take it or leave it, but it's still there somewhere.
Yeah.
So nations have that too, communities have that too. And I think about, I mean, you can't separate the United States of America from what is happening in Christianity today because of how we think about freedom and how we think about liberty and how we think about individuals, and all those hot button words have found their way. It's for me part of the reason I can't do a huge evangelical mega church that has, it feels commercial to me, it feels capitalism to me.
Mhm.
But I do understand that some people, that works for them. So I wouldn't want to take away anything transformative from people. But is that what you're talking about? Like words like that and how they have found their way into
Yeah.
Christianity?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I think it's something that like even right now, we're part of the ELCA and the E in
Yeah.
ELCA, evangelical. There's a whole debate, the inside baseball part of church, right? About whether we should ditch the word evangelical or not, because the word has changed over time as far as in the common culture of what that means. Whereas, from a Lutheran perspective, Luther used evangelical in a certain way to just say proclaimers of the gospel. I mean, that's a
We share the good
simplistic.
news. Yeah.
Share the good news, proclaimers of the gospel. That's what evangelical means. It had no attachment to an ideology or anything of that nature. It was very much a theological, which makes sense given Luther was an Old Testament professor and all that. And now here we are 500 years later, and we're like, well, evangelical, it's got a nasty reputation. Should we ditch it or not?
Yeah. I am for reclaiming words. I mean,
Yeah.
There's even a thing in linguistics where that's what
Yeah,
happens. Think of some derogatory words for groups and how when you're a member of that in group, you can use it with other members of the in
right,
group. That's a
right.
linguistic phenomenon that happens in many languages. When a word is used in a negative way, a group can take it and reclaim it and make it their own. And I'm a fan of doing that because I feel like kind of like the heresy thing. If we just get rid of the evangelical in ELCA,
Right.
then we're just kind of leaving the conversation. And I'd rather keep wrestling with it because I think that's where the change and the connection happens. And I think connection can be the antidote to a lot of the division that's
Yeah.
going on, even if we don't agree, but just connect and debate anyway.
Yeah. I also feel that if we give that up, then it's just going to move to something else.
Yeah.
And then
We're surrendering it to nationalists.
we
Yeah.
just completely surrendered the word. It's kind of like how you can I have seen this with other type of not trends but other things is depending on who's using what words will determine you can take a look and you can see what's going to be um, uh, become part of the culture. So if you take a look, you go back to the 70s, you can see this in the whole debates around marriage and marriage equality and all of that, right? And so it was very like anti this, that, and the other thing. And then when anti marriage equality started using the terms that those that were in favor were using, what happens is you start to have a shift because now you've these folks who were opposed. It's one of those things that when you start using your opponent's language, you're legitimizing your opponent's view on things.
Mm-hmm.
And so you start to see the shift, and it happened really really quick, honestly. Like as far as a cultural shift that goes on, but that's also like the power of language has a huge impact on how cultures can shift, which I think is really good news. That it's like this is doesn't have to always be. We don't have to be continuing down a dystopian future that we seem hell bent on right now. Uh, we that can change based on the language that's used.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I don't know other people's personal experiences. I don't have much control over the thoughts that I have. I do have control over the words that I write or say. And I
Hmm.
find that my thoughts follow suit. If I
Mm,
use that language enough, the thoughts start to follow the words, if that
yeah.
makes sense.
Oh,
I think
sure.
we often think that it's just like we have a thought and then it becomes language, but it can also work in a circle where the
Yep.
language then influences how we think, which changes us at a very biological level and a communal level at the same time. Language really matters.
There was I remember reading something about that very thing where there were soldiers, American soldiers who were captured in Korea and under they were imprisoned by the North Koreans, the Chinese, and so what they would do is they would have these prisoners start to write like pro propaganda letters. No punishment or anything like that. They would give them something extra if they did it. You don't have to believe it. You don't have to like it. You don't have to do anything, but we want you to write this. We'll tell you what to write. And so they did this. And over the course of a short period of time, because of them writing the words, it started to change what they believed about why they were fighting and all this type of stuff. I mean, like, wow, that is,
There's there's a docu-series on Netflix right now. I think it's called The False Prophet, and it's about a fundamentalist LDS community out west. I think it's in Utah. And there are women, there's this man who has many wives, and it's
mhm,
a cult. He's
sure.
in prison now, it's a whole thing. And he had them fill notebooks with I love you so much, I love you so much, I love
Wow.
you so much. And it's the same thing. If somebody uses the language over and over and over again, they start to believe it.
Yeah. Wow. It's just fascinating. Holy cow.
Wild. Yeah,
Uh,
wild. That's
so,
why sometimes when people are like, oh, it's just semantics, I'm like,
oof,
semantics is everything. It's
yeah, right.
everything. The language matters.
Yeah, no kidding. My
Mhm.
gosh, just semantics. Tell that to the to Thomas Jefferson in writing the the
Right.
Declaration, right? Just
Yeah.
semantics. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. Tell it to any, there's a reason why
right.
so many lawyers were English
Oh,
majors.
right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah. So as we're getting close to the end of the time, what's your hope for the book? Where do you hope it goes to, into whose hands, and what's the hope of the impact?
Well, my hope is mostly that people, so far, it's been a lot of churchgoers who are interested, but that's also, I have a lot of people in my life who are churchgoers. But I hope that people can read it and have a deeper understanding and start to see that this Jesus story, this thing we call Christianity, is actually so encompassing. And even something as divisive as politics is not, that's under the umbrella too. Like all of it is here, all of it. And it's not, for me, this is really important. The Jesus story is not just this lofty, spiritualized, somewhere
Yep.
else story. It's here and it's now. And politics is just how we arrange our shared lives together. And the Jesus story can inform that. If that's the story that we cling to, it is for me. Um, but it's here and it's now, like eternity already started. Like we're,
Yep.
this, the kingdom is right here. So, I mean, I have this in my book too, but whenever John the Baptist and Jesus of Nazareth are saying the kingdom is near, they're saying, hey, Rome is about to fall
Yep.
and the way of justice can come. Like the empire will always fall, but the way of justice will not disappear. Like there
Yep.
are always people ready to start doing that work.
Preach it.
So it's grounded. It's right here.
That was awesome. I love that. That's great. And where can people find the book?
It's everywhere.
It's
It's on it's on
Dude.
Amazon, it's on barnesandnoble.com, it's on bookshop.com. It's everywhere. It's with Pilgrim Press, which is
Mhm.
UCC's publishing house. So it's on their website. It's available for pre-order and then it comes out September 7th. Which, fun
Okay.
fact, if you didn't know, publication dates are almost always a Tuesday.
No,
I
I
didn't
didn't
know
know
that.
that.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. I was like, Tuesday, that's random. Turns out all books are released on a Tuesday
Oh,
because of
that's interesting.
logistics with like
Oh,
things
sure.
being shipped and whatnot. But
Oh, that's really
September 7th.
fast.
Yeah,
Fun
but
fun fact of the day. How about that?
yeah, yeah.
Last thoughts. Anything else that you want to share about the book or anything else?
Do we have like 60 seconds?
Oh, we got more than that. That's fine.
I want to talk about America Reads the Bible.
Okay,
I
yeah,
very
we
much want to talk about that because I
okay,
know that
that's
you wrote
fine.
about it.
We got 8 minutes. So
Okay, okay. So the America Reads the Bible event, I read your post on it, which was
yeah.
so good. And for me, it's about language. So the questions that come up is I want to know, who do you mean by America?
Yep.
Because this is the United States.
Yep.
There is Canada, there is Mexico, there is South America, there is Central America.
Right.
What do you mean by the Bible?
Yep.
What translation? Also, what Americans? So even if you're going to
Yep.
say the U.S. Americans, what Americans? The people with
Right.
power. Um, what Bible? What translation? What books of the Bible? We don't have a unified Bible. And then even like Christian, like I'm really
Yep.
active on Instagram, and a lot of people will comment or message me saying you're not a Christian. Who gets to decide what a Christian is these days, too? It's like it goes back to language. What America, what Bible, who is a Christian?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, yeah, that and I don't know if you know this, but they're doing the same thing here in Pennsylvania at the state capitol.
No, I did not know
Yes.
that.
So there's a bunch of state representatives and other folks, which I find even more ironic, given that the Bible is anti-empire, it's a story of people who are always on the losing end,
Mhm,
um, that are oppressed, and here you
mhm,
have people who are in positions of power, which is an old story also, right? I mean, this
mhm.
is how the American history, at the very least, if not world history, is full of people in power using God for their own purposes.
King
Uh,
Solomon, whose people were enslaved in Egypt,
yep,
he started building the temple with slave
yep,
labor.
of
Like
his
we
own
just
people.
can't learn our lesson. We can't learn the lesson. We keep circling back. It's like we're circling the drain until we get it.
Right. One of the it showed up on my Facebook feed of one of the state representatives. I don't remember which one. And there she is. She's reading, and I just posted the comment: "Stop using the Bible as a prop." And oftentimes and you do have, this is one of the words that you have in your book is King James Bible, which
Mhm.
I thank you so much for for reading that chapter, because so many people have this idea of, oh, that's the authorized. Well, it's just authorized by a king. That's all it
Yes,
is.
by the king.
Like it's
Yeah.
not authorized by God.
And I
Um,
go to bookstores, and that's the only translation I see. And I
oh
decided
my
to look into it.
gosh.
It's because it's in the public domain, so it makes
Right,
publishers more money. Again,
right,
it's about empire and money over and
right,
over again,
right.
everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The America reads the Bible thing it disturbed me so much
Hmm.
because this is very much a Christian nationalism thing associated with those museums. This is where, I dug in and it was like, well, who's behind this museum? Well, they spent $500 million on this museum. And it's the CEO of Hobby Lobby who's pushing this, and I'm like that there's a whole stream of thought that goes along with this. This is not just for the benefit of getting the scripture out
Uh-huh.
there, because if it was, this is the other part of it is, okay, so we're going to read these passages of scripture, and at the same time, the very people who have the power to vote on legislation related to things that are in scripture that Jesus said are going to vote against those very things that they read aloud.
Yes. And the compelling thing about the Bible is that it's written by the losers of the war. And if you
Right.
even read the stories, there's a reason why so many of those stories are written from the perspective of the youngest son, because
Yep.
in culture, the youngest son didn't have the power. They didn't
Yep.
have inheritance. There's a reason why over and over again it's written from the perspective of the people without the power. And now we have people in power using it, which reminds me of one more phrase,
Yeah. Yeah.
horses and chariots. That's another one that did me in. Horses and chariots were weapons of war. We don't often think of that, but they were weapons of war. So when we have in Exodus, we have the Red Sea going
Yep.
over horses and chariots. That's like going over tanks and drones today,
Yep.
right? Like saying, and then we have, is it Psalm 20 says, some trust in chariots, but we trust in God. That means you can't trust in the violence of military and God at
Yep.
the same time. So whenever you are part of a government, and you and I are too, we're taxpayers and our money
Yep.
is going in dangerous places, we're all caught up in the system, which is what John the Baptist was cleansing Jews from, is like,
Yep.
let's just cleanse you from that so you can start afresh. Now, we don't all have to be John the Baptist living in the wilderness separate. But
Well,
I
this
just
is
think about
where
that a lot.
Revelation comes in. This is, the whole idea of the mark of the beast is you're stuck in this
Mm-hmm.
system. What is it? It's the money. You have to
The
utilize money,
commerce. Yeah.
right? And that's all part of it. And like I think Revelation is very timely, not because of apocalyptic end of the world destruction type of thing, but in terms of relationship to empire, and the hopeful message that in spite of all that, it's that will end, because empires always end because they're
Mm-hmm.
narcissistic entities that collapse on themselves because they're based on the ends justify the means. And when the ends justifies the means, then everything and everyone is disposable, and that includes those that hold and believe that they're exempt.
Yeah. Well,
That's
even tax collectors, they
Yep.
were charging extra. And in the
Right.
Bible, they are not told to stop doing their job. You all need
Right.
a job, we get it, but stop exploiting the powerless is
Right.
what they're told. Stop charging extra. So yes,
Yep.
we're all caught up in a system, and we have to have a life, and we have to be able to afford food and water, but we can do it in a loving, non-exploitive way in our different roles.
That's the whole message right
That's the
there.
whole thing.
And it's the message that there's a cycle that just keeps happening, that
Hmm.
in the Old Testament there's a covenant, the people cheer, then the people decide, nah, we're going to do something different, then they suffer the consequences,
Hmm.
then they cry out, God hears them, sends a savior, renews a new covenant, and it starts all over again, and
And isn't
humanity
that the path of
continues.
our own life too?
Oh,
Like there's
absolutely.
there's a lesson that comes around, and I just didn't get it, but it comes around again, and
Yep.
it just keeps coming around till I get
Yep.
it.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Samantha, thank you very much. It's
Thank
been an
you.
enjoyable conversation. This is again, I got to nerd out. I love I
I know
love
I could do
this.
this all day.
It's so great. Yeah. So, folks, you can find the book. The title of the book is "Tongue in Church: A Liberating Primer on Christian Vocabulary." You can find it wherever good books are found, and probably also not so great books, but buy good books like Samantha's book. And other than that, I hope everyone has a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much.